Hello, everybody. This is Debby Enoe from Teacher Success Coach on the challenge and triumph of online teaching during the COVID-19 at the Female Educators Roundtable. I'm here again with another of my guests, female educator from around the world. Before I actually start, I must apologize for yesterday. One of the challenges yesterday was it was raining. So as a result of that, the educator I had, we got cut off because of the rain, but she'll be back next weekend, next Saturday or Sunday. So there's some of the challenges that these educators actually encountered while teaching online. It was very apparent yesterday because we couldn't even get back online. Right, welcome, Michelle. Thank you very much for accepting the offer for coming online to share your experiences of teaching online and supporting educators and students, etc. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do, and we take it from there. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Debbie, for having me. I'm deeply humbled to be on your platform today. I am an educator, been an educator for more than a decade. Without aging myself too much. It is definitely my wheelhouse. I am so passionate about the work that I do. I have been in all realms of education, on the administrative side. I'm still on the administrative side. I've taught at the elementary school level. I was a founding school principal in Brooklyn. I was an assistant principal, dean of students, and I'm currently now the director of teaching and learning. So I have supported the development of teachers. I've also worked very closely with teachers in terms of, mentorship, teacher coaching, and then, supporting students and families. So I'm very deep in the work. And like I said, I'm incredibly passionate about the work. I'm also the host of my own online platform, Motherhood Real Talk. And that's also an opportunity for mothers to come together in a community to share their experiences and testimonials around things that they're experiencing. And I'm a believer in, the idea of learning from the experiences of other folks and putting into practice best practices as we do. And I think that's the educator at heart in me, to find the learning and teachings and everything and share it on a wider platform. And so that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I want to ask you about your program before we actually get into thing. Right, you say you've got a platform for mothers. Okay, so what exactly do you have you guys discussed female mothers educators and the fact that
it's mothers that are at different places in their lives. So it's not just educators. I think when there's a topic that really and truly speaks to what's happening currently or speaks to my heart, then I tend to do an episode on that, because I think oftentimes the learning and the teaching comes from the things that you're experiencing. That saying that says necessity is the mother of all invention. And so it's like this platform came from a place of I need some healing right now, and a lot of times the places that I find healing is to read or see or talk to someone that has been through it. And so there's just so much, and I love to call it gems of wisdom. There's just so much that you can get from others when they've gone through it. And then there is a sense of, optimism when you recognize that here's a person that's experiencing the same thing that I'm going through, and they've lived to talk about it. So I know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And so that for me, I think is empowering. And I think it's empowering for other people to be able to see that, because you just never know, who you can touch with your stories. And with all that's happening now virtually, you're able to connect with more people, real time. And I'll say for myself, and oftentimes the feedback that I get from others too, that it is impactful. you know, whether it's one person, two people, three people, you know, there are things that folks are experiencing that sometimes is taboo, or they don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about, you know, with others. But when you can, you know, get on this platform and say, oh, they had a topic that it's discussing something that I'm experiencing right now, you know, and I can connect with that. And there's a lot of aha moments in here, and I can legitimately take my notes, you know, and go back in my car and kind of go through and see what are the things I can use. I think that's powerful. And so that's essentially what my platform does. It's fairly new, and, you know, we're still kind of working the kinks out and understanding, you know, what are the topics that we should ensure that we're addressing as it relates to motherhood, but still thinking about things that are most current and pressing for everyone. Because I think, you know, as mothers, you know, sometimes we think that those things really just affect us, but dads are pulling information from it. Folks that are not yet mothers are pulling information from it because they're life lessons, you know, so
Right, that's fantastic. So although you say it's motherhood, it affects everybody, because some of the topics that you're looking at would affect everybody. So therefore they could actually draw from those experiences.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that. And as you say, that sometimes you think that you are the only one going through this, whether or not it's a fear element, whether or not it's doubt you're having, you think that you are the only one in this bubble and no one else is experiencing the same thing as you do. But the minute you put it out and you start getting things back, you're thinking, okay, I'm not the only one.
Exactly. And I think it removes sometimes the stigma that's associated with certain topics when people get comfortable in expressing, you know, the things that they're going through. And you know, I think before, even when people would talk about mental health and being able to go to therapy and talk about certain things, those things were taboo. So people would internalize a lot of what the challenges are that they're experiencing, and then they never really get the help that they need. You know, and I'll be the first to raise my hand to say, again, being that I've been in education, right? And I've been an administrator and I've worked with scholars, you have learned to kind of take on the challenges of others, you know, and kind of have this even keel kind of attitude, because you got to help somebody else to move through it, but you never explore your own feelings. And then you've now in turn conditioned yourself to sometimes not necessarily feel for yourself, because you always have to be in this emotionally constant state, you know. When the pandemic happened and we had to shift to virtual learning, you know, you had teachers were really concerned about, you know, what was going to happen. And then even I myself was like, in my mind, like, oh my God, how is this going to work? But I had to present to my teachers and my scholars and my parents that we're going to figure it out. We're going to make it work. We're going to make it happen, you know? And so, but it's okay, even as an administrator, to be transparent and say, look, I empathize with all that you're feeling right now, just the same way, you know, you're in this whirlwind trying to figure it out. I'm the least techie person you can find, but I'm gonna try to get good. So let's try to get into this and do this together.
Yeah, that is very true. And one of the, you know, there's a lot of value in demonstrating that you don't know and being transparent, than always feeling that you are able to carry everything. And that's one of the sadness of educators. They're giving out to the world that they could carry everything. And as a result of that, the world begin to see them as the carrier of everything. So when they say they're unable to carry, they then become, you know, people begin to frown upon them and say, how can you not carry all of that? Because you're the educator. The reason why we have actually set ourselves up all the time, and I constantly say to my educators, you need to be transparent. You don't know the answer. Tell the students or your colleague you don't know the answer. Why do you feel that you need to be representative of having all the answer? And that's our downfall as women and as educators.
I think what I'd like to add to that, I think now, and I don't know that everybody is there yet, but there has been a paradigm shift when we're thinking about how we educate students. And I think traditionally, it has always been, we're the reservoir of all the information, and then we just need to pour into the kids, as opposed to, you know, taking in some of what children are already coming with and make it more so, you know, this reciprocal practice of how we learn. And so, you know, when you go through a traditional educational track, it's like, you know, we got to do the I do, the we do, and then the you do, you know, as opposed to inquiring about what kids really know through questioning, and then facilitate the learning. And so until there's a full shift there's always going to be that where we feel like we have to take on the bulk of the work and do the heavy lifting for our students. And honestly, you know, it's starting to now be proven that information is more sticky for students and adults when they're able to engage more with the content and the concepts that are being taught. Because it's one thing to just sit and just listen, but if you can actively engage and have discourse around what it is that you're learning, then it activates different parts of the brain and makes the learning more sticky. And I think it's also the same thing when we start to see parents as partners, because oftentimes it becomes, you have the formal training and education, and so you are going to know what to do. And as a principal, it was always parents are our partners. And so when I had my family orientation, it was mandatory for parents to come and be a part of that, because I want you to understand, what are your scholars learning in school? And then the pushback sometimes you'll get, and I wouldn't say necessarily the pushback, but the thing that, you know, parents would oftentimes say, I didn't learn it that way, so I don't know it. And so then it's like, well, come in. We have an open door policy, you know, come in and sit in this literature circle so you can see, you know, what your scholars are doing. Come into this, you know, math lesson and sit to see what inquiry-based instruction looks like. Call up your scholars teacher, because they are open to having the conversation so you can support them, because not everything can happen in school. Yes, they're asking for 9 hours a day, but then there has to be more learning and there has to be reinforcement, you know, at home with the practices that they're learning in school. So everybody is in this together. So I knew very early that we had to debunk that idea of educators are the sole proprietors when it comes to educating our scholars. It's everybody in that village that has to do some of that work. But we also have to make the space for parents to be able to come in and be active. And so if I'm going to facilitate, you know, a session on something, we might do a morning session, and then we might do an afternoon session or an evening session, because we also know we're working with working parents. But I will say this, much like I shared with you before, this whole virtual thing has opened up another realm of how we can really reach our parents. Because before this, I didn't think we can do a parent-teacher conference over Zoom, right? And now I was conducting several over Zoom, you know, and parents were grateful that they had another way, because we couldn't physically be in the school building, to still be engaged in their scholars' learning. And so I think that this now has opened up another way for us to be able to connect with our working families when they physically cannot be at a function. And so now my mind is going like, oh, when we're getting ready to do, you know, another, you know, curriculum night, I could do one where parents have the option, you can come into the building, you know, and engage with it, or you can watch us online, you know, from home using the Zoom platform. So I think that there's much to learn about how technology is now being used in this time.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with you there. It's like my mind was actually buzzing as well. I'm thinking, okay, so in terms of, you know, now I am hoping that when we go back to school, we'll have a lot more partnership with parents, i.e., you know, one would be the excuses, oh, I'm working late. So therefore they'll have the opportunity to see what we've actually done online, or even, you know, connect with them online, because that's another opportunity. They don't necessarily have to come into the physical building, because one of the challenges we've always had in terms of getting parents who physically come to the consultation is, I'm working late, I'm not able to make it, I'll be too tired. It's like the marriage of excuses. You know, sometimes in a class of 50, you might be lucky if you have 10 parents, and it is useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I try to be careful about making those assumptions. I don't necessarily, I try to assume the best, because I think that every parent wants what's best for their scholar, and they often, you know, would try to do the best they can, the best way they know how to do it. And, you know, I've worked, again, you know, most of my work has been with working families, right? And so like working is a necessity. And then a lot of them have to work around the clock to ensure that they can provide, you know, the necessary things for their scholars. And so oftentimes, you know, I was in that place where, you know, we would facilitate, you know, an orientation that we say was mandatory, and we didn't get a good turnout. And then we had to get creative, you know, in the ways in which we can draw our families in, because like I said, you know, in order to ensure that scholars are getting what they need, there has to be a strong partnership between home and school, and parents need to know what's happening in school. And so you know, I think now, and like I said, I've never thought about the digital form or the virtual form of being able to connect with parents. It was always, I had to run multiple sessions, you know, to try to get families in. You know, we had to make phone calls, robocalls is what we call it, you know, different means of communicating, flyers, getting parents to come in, you know, different ways in trying to rally them. And some of them will try, you get the same few, and then you got some that will say the things that they say, and but it's a real thing, you know. It's like I work all of these hours and I really and truly want to be there, but you know, I can't make it. So what do we then do? And then I'm like, all right, maybe I'll just backpack some of the information home with hopes that you know, they'll tackle the information. But then you get the other side of it when, you know, when they finally come, it's like, well, I didn't know, or you know, I still don't know how to support my scholar. And a part of it was like, well, here was the orientation or whatever it was to try to meet that need. But I do think that it's a real challenge, you know, in particular environments where parents do have to work around the clock to ensure that their children have the necessities. But like I said, you know, now in the era of COVID-19, you know, we're recognizing that now there are many ways in which we can now communicate and connect with parents outside of the traditional, you need to physically be in this building to get the information. So.
Yeah. Thank you. How did you support the teachers and the learners during this time?
I think it was a lot of learning together. Like I said, I think, you know, initially when we recognized that we were going to go into full virtual mode, nobody knew exactly what it was going to look like. And so the initial thing that we kind of corralled around was like, okay, what are the things we're going to ensure that scholars will need to know by the end of the school year? And how will be the best way to be able to get that information? And teachers, much like children, are very resilient. They're like, all right, you know, what are we going to do to make sure that this works? And so every teacher was on board about what to do for their particular scholars, going above and beyond. And so we spent quite some time. Initially, when we knew we were getting ready to roll out, we were like, okay, we can't get the virtual platform up and running right away because we have to be intentional about how kids are going to get technology. You know, will they have internet access to be able to do it? You know, what kinds of supports are going to be in home to do it? So we initially started off with creating review packets. And so the intention behind that was that we're going to give scholars review, most of which they could do on their own to get them acclimated to this process of not being in school. And so that was and that they weren't going home without anything to do. And so that bought us some time to figure out what the platform was going to look like. And then, but the good thing is the organization that I was working with before, some of what the kids were doing in school was already on a digital platform. So kids knew how to navigate some of those applications already. And, you know, kids in this day and age, you know, they have iPads and other, you know, other devices that they already use. So much of that usage isn't necessarily new. It's more so having the oversight of an adult to support with content that they didn't learn before having to leave school. So when we launched our digital platform, we did a lot of work around the student data and recognizing what are the things that they need to continuously work on and will make the biggest impact as it relates to ELA and it relates to mathematics. Once we identified that, then we looked for resources that teachers were going to use to continue instruction. It wasn't live instruction except for scholars that had sped services, so they would have contact with their teachers directly. But for the gen ed scholars, the teachers would create lessons and then we'll upload them onto our online platform. So we use Google Classroom. And then Clever is like a single sign-on program where kids were able to access their Google Classroom and then other applications that was supported online as it relates to reading and math. So we were pulling, like there was like RAS Kids, there was Zern, which is a math program. So all of those application scholars were already using in school as a part of their instruction. So it was more so now going in full virtual mode, using those online platforms. And then teachers were also creating instructional videos that related to the concepts that scholars needed to continue throughout the rest of the school year based on achievement data. Now, teachers also had office hours for students to be able to, you know, get access to them if they needed additional support, students and parents. And then we also made sure that there were weekly check-ins with every scholar would call to connect to make sure that they had what they need, you know, whether it was on the physiological aspect of it, because I mean, kids were missing connecting also with the folks that they're used to being in school with for 9 hours a day. And so we tried as much as possible to keep some things that was the norm for them. We still had our community circle on Friday where kids got an opportunity to log in. We still did our morning meetings every morning, so kids had an opportunity to still connect with the students that were in their class, their friends, and their teachers. And then there was more flexibility throughout the day for when they wanted to access the academic videos, which then also worked for the parents. So if like I'm a mom, you know, who works in the mornings and my scholar would have to stay with a grandparent for that time, then when I come in the afternoon, I can access whatever the content is and then support my scholar. They can do what they can do on their own, but then when I come home, the information is still there. So it's not like it's live and then it goes once the teacher is done teaching. So I thought that that was also good for kids to be able to go back and refer back to. And so that was kind of like the way that we managed it for a while. Now, that's not to say that there still weren't challenges, but I think that we were pretty responsive in that, like if we needed to deliver computers at home, like computers were being delivered at home. We did have an opportunity for families to come and do a drive-by, you know, to pick up devices for scholars if they needed to have them fixed for whatever reason. Then there was sort of like this number they can call in and we can replace the device. And then they tried to create hotspots also to make sure that scholars had access to internet. So there was some of that, but then there was also families that it was really hard to reach over the phone. So sometimes they had to do like a, you know, a drive-by to see if everything was okay with that particular family. But overall, I think that given the time that we had to make this transformation, we did pretty good. But now, you know, in Georgia, it seems as if there's going to be an extended period for virtual learning. So this is an opportunity for us to now reflect to see, you know, what was good about that launch. And now what are the things we need to take to the next level to make it even better. And I think a part of that is giving parents some training about how to use the virtual platforms, because I think the children were the gatekeepers of that knowledge for a long time. And so that was some of the consistent challenges we heard from parents, not recognizing how to log into certain platforms that we were using to ensure that scholars can, you know, stay on top of their schoolwork.
Thank you. What were some of the challenges with some of the teachers you had that wasn't internet savvy? Were there any reluctance with them in terms of wanting to go on? Because one of the experience I've had is you have the educators, the younger ones who were not competent enough in the knowledge base, and then you have the older or mature educators who were not computer savvy and had the fear of actually attempting. So there were a lot of coaxing had to be done with the mature educators? What were some of the challenges you've had?
That was exactly. Listen, I made it known that I was not the techiest person ever. So you were not in that alone. But at the end of all of it, much like we show up each and every day for scholars, this is the realm now that we have to show up for our scholars. And I think if we go back to the reason why we do this for kids, no matter what the challenges that surfaces, you can always get over that hump because we know we do whatever it takes when it comes to doing what we do for kids. And that's always the thing for teachers who are incredibly passionate about what they do. Even if there's sometimes a hang up about something, when you have that heart-to-heart conversation about why do we really do this, right? It's like, well, we want to make sure that our scholars are getting what they need to get. And so how are we going to do that in this area? Because we recognize we can't have them in the building. So the next best thing is to be able to do this. And the good thing about us is we always figure it out. And so I let them know, and I was very transparent, and this is why now I think, education in essence did not have the kind of respect that it needed to have. And now folks are starting to recognize that, because at the end of the day, we always get it done, right? But it's not without some level of sacrifice. So even if there's, and usually when there's some resistance from teachers, it's because we're so hard on ourselves that we want to do it and do it well. And so in that moment, this is what I'm saying, as a leader, I had to kind of rise to the occasion and be transparent, saying, look, I am the least techie person there is, but we got to get good at this real fast. Why? Because our kids need it. And the good thing is there were other educators that were pretty good on the online platform. And it wasn't necessarily me that was doing the coaching on how to crank up your Google Classroom and get it going with all the fancy techie stuff. It was actually another teacher. And so we had to figure out, where our strengths were and where our areas of weaknesses are, and say, look, I'm going to lean into so-and-so today because she knows how to get this video on Google Classroom and funk it up and make it great. We had rap battles between teachers that were teaching, multiplication facts. And so they made it their own. I'm like, well, how are you able to do that? Like, before I didn't even know how to change my Zoom, the back part of my Zoom, and do all that. And it was teachers that were training me. And so it's that thing that we do as educators where, when we get good at something, that just doesn't live with us. We tend to pull our fellow educators in and we share that wealth of knowledge so everybody can get good really fast. And so that's what coaching is all about. And coaching doesn't necessarily have to come from the coach, right? That's a part of learning. And it's the same thing when we're talking about facilitating, instruction for our kids. The learning doesn't always have to come from the teacher. And so this was everybody in the midst of all of this recognizing, like, I know I'm not good at this, but so-and-so is good at it. So I'm going to enlist this person to help me. And it's okay to say that you're not good at this. Exactly. And one of the things that we actually did too, we delegated the work. So everybody didn't have to do everything. So even though I had my group of kids, if I'm going to teach math and they're working on the same, skill set, then I'm going to make this video and I can share this video with your class and you can share this video with my class, and I can do this ELA section and you can do this ELA section to make it more manageable and then give you more time to then be able to support your scholars during your office time. So it wasn't that folks were, in this place of isolation and doing it on their own. I think that there was collective support, which made it more manageable. And folks that were initially, apprehensive about doing it were now on board because they had the support of their colleagues to be able to work through those kinks.
Thank you. Peer support is a fantastic tool. It really does help the educators, because I know in terms of, for us having, WhatsApp groups, etc., it's really supportive, because when you realize that, oh my goodness, I don't know how to upload, I don't know how to share my screen on Zoom, show me how to do that, tell me how to do that. It really does help, because you realize, A, you're not alone, and B, you didn't know it, so you reach out. And it is so important that as educators we are transparent. The more transparent we are, the easier it becomes for us, because we are not seen as the the encyclopedia with all the answers. We see that we can facilitate, we could show you where to get it from. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but I feel that's a big part. And I feel also that the online platform has actually taught us a lot more of that, to be transparent and own up to, we don't carry all the answers. I don't know if you've actually seen that, you did mention a bit of that, but I think we need to take more responsibility of that we don't know, being transparent of it, instead of feeling ashamed that we don't know. Because we are educators, we feel that we ought to know. Hell no.
Yeah, and I think that there is a level of partnership and community that you build with your people when they know that they have a voice in what's happening. People tend to want to, to feel more involved and feel responsible for the work that they're putting in. And when they're able to, share their feedback, when they're able to be active in the learning, when they're able to support each other, and even when you're kind of like, let's figure it out together, because you're on the ground and you're doing it, there's a different level of appreciation for that kind of leadership. And leadership is a partnership. When you're on this plane together with your people, you want everybody to feel like you're moving towards a collective goal. And if we are, there are a set of shared values, there's a set of shared expectations, there's shared learning that we have to engage in together to ensure that we reach whatever that big goal is. And it feels more rewarding for everybody because they're a part of it. And there's less pushback, because then, if there are folks that are not necessarily, but wait, we agreed on all these things together, remember? And so now we got to go back and do what it takes to make sure that it happens. So it works on both ends. When you have to provide feedback and push people really hard when it gets difficult, to say, hey, we agreed on this together. We were in this together. You said that this is what we wanted. This is what it should look, sound, and feel like in this building. So how are we going to work on that collectively? So.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Thank you for that. It's interesting. But I think when we actually get the students more involved, they take more ownership of the whole thing, because they're there with you, helping you through it. And that is something I've actually seen for myself in the classroom. Once you actually, allow the student to take ownership and demonstrate to them that I really do not know, but we are going to figure it out together, the lesson becomes a dream, because then they start taking responsibility, because they start feeling responsible. So as a result of that, you actually get them to be much more active in their learning. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a teacher at heart, and my teachers will tell you I'm the most giddy and excited when I got my little teacher bin and I'm getting ready to pop in a classroom to go teach, a lesson. Because to see how scholars come alive, when there's that aha moment, you've unlocked something for them. And, whenever I'm going in to teach a new concept or new content, I do the intellectual preparation myself to say, what are the things that kids are going to go through in order to arrive at this place? And then that's where I would come up with the types of questions I'll need to ask to drive them there. But a lot of times it's a lot of feigning ears. But wait a minute, how did you know that? Because see, when Ms. Flowers is thinking about this, that's not what I got. How did you come up with that? Oh, this mathematician right here. Oh my goodness. This, and when you do all of those things, then scholars get super excited about, oh my, I knew it was always in me the whole time. I just needed somebody to facilitate this learning. Not tell me what to do, but facilitate this learning. And again, kids are good at learning from each other. And so there are times when, I can't necessarily find the language, to make the clearest explanation. And then I have this mathematician come up and put their work under the doc cam and then start, walking through it. And then kids are like, oh, I see that, or look at this other way, because we come with our own thinking about this is the way to solve it. And then a kid would, do something different. It's like, oh my goodness. Like, I didn't even think about it from that perspective. And then it empowers them, to then be able to think outside the box. So the next day for your lesson, everybody is looking forward to this lesson, because now, I want to be able to show my work and I want to be able to talk about the thing that I took away, you know, from today's lesson. And then it takes away from, you know, the unnecessary chatter about things that sometimes becomes the focal point, because now kids are talking about what you want them to be able to talk about because it's interesting. It's growing their brains, and they love that. So we always have to give kids something to want. And once we do that, then it's up on and onwards from there. And that makes me excited. That kind of learning and discourse happening in the classroom. But it really starts with us being intellectually prepared about where we want kids to go and what kinds of questions we need to ask to be able to drive them there and get them excited about, you know, what they're getting ready to do.
Thank you. How do you feel that could actually connect with the online platform?
I think again with the online platform, because you're not necessarily in class with the scholars, it's a different level. And teaching, again, you know, it is a performance. You're on stage, you know.
I know.
And there is an act that goes into it. So now you're doing this without an audience, which makes it you know, even more challenging. And so when you're trying to facilitate learning from an inquiry-based perspective, you know, there is intention around, where am I going to pause to give them an opportunity to be able to think through it? And so you still try to do some of those things. It may not necessarily land the same way it would in a classroom when you're getting the, you know, real-time feedback from scholars, but still ensuring that those lessons are still exciting enough for scholars to want to engage, which can be difficult. And also still ensuring that you're leaving space for scholars to have an opportunity to grapple with the material before then, you know, you start doing the walkthrough. So you know, the virtual model, there is sometimes a double whammy when you have to do the pre-recorded version, because it slightly goes back to the traditional way of doing things where, you know, once you give them the opportunity to think through it, you still have to kind of like do the I do, the we do, the you do, because, you know, there are other scholars that may need that level of direction and you can't get to them right away to give that in the moment feedback. But like I said, this still gives us an opportunity to figure out what are the things that worked before and things that we definitely have to do the 2.0 version of. And so, like I said, I've been looking at a lot of virtual platforms where Academica is one where, but this again is going to require funding. And that's the issue usually, again, in underserved neighborhoods where, you know, you don't necessarily have the smart boards or the smart technology to help teachers to be able to facilitate that. But one of the things now that we're looking at doing is seeing what parts of our curriculum goes virtual, because a lot of the curriculum development vendors now are starting to make online components to their curriculum. And so there are certain applications that you can currently now use in your classrooms virtually. And so, you know, my current school, we're getting sort of like those cameras, you know, that are sensory. So when you move, it moves with you. So like the teachers are in the classroom, the kids are doing the virtual learning at home. It feels live because, you know, you have all the technology to support, you know, that level of instruction. So you get some of that real-time classroom learning with the social distancing still, but I don't know necessarily, you know, if all schools will be able to afford that to scholars. So some may still have to rely on, you know, the recording of a lesson and then uploading it and kids going and watching it. But I think if we can get to a full virtual model where, you know, teachers can do the, you know, but then that also requires building, because you don't necessarily have the technology at home either. But on Google Classroom and Zoom, teachers can do some of that work there also. So there are different ways in which we can get creative and explore this to make the learning come alive for kids. Because in different places they've been doing it. They've been online learning, you know, in foreign countries for quite some time, where you have teachers teaching overseas, you know, through a virtual platform. I think because the pandemic just came through, you know, kind of boom, everybody had to figure it out really quickly. But, you know, I think now, you know, we're trying to navigate it with a little bit more intention. But again, there are also the things, and this is where sometimes politics kind of like clouds what we try to do as educators, because there's never clear direction around anything, and then you have people giving you advice that's not even in it. You know what I mean? And so now, you know, you have the president, you know, threatening to take away funding during a time when we need it most, right? To make the most for our scholars. So that's another challenge educators are probably going to have to combat, you know, given all the other challenges with the things that we're having to do. So it's almost like whenever we're trying to be great, you know, the powers that be still, you know, and we still have to rise above that. So education is not for the faint of heart. And that's the thing I tell my teachers all the time. When you get into this work, you got to have that burning passion in your gut to say, this is why I'm doing this, because, you know, it's a constant, you know, fighting and clawing to get the basic things that you need to do what we know our scholars need, you know.
That's true. I really agree with you on that, in terms of, for educators, in order to be in that job, you have to have the purpose, the passion, and it's got to be something in your guts, because teaching is not an easy job. We got, you know, when you actually look at all the restraints there is, because in some schools that I've been in, I had to bring in the resources, they didn't have the basic, you know, so those are the things. You have to really have a passion, real passion to do the job. And we know some educators are in the job for the job's sake, you know, and it begin to show, but those that have the passion, you know, you just make sure that you get things done. It's a passion. I totally agree with you there. Another thing is, how many of your educators and how many of your students were actually able to be online? What percentages of educators who actually, what percentage of students that the educators had on a daily basis or weekly basis?
It looked different at the different age groups. And so that's where the challenges lie. For the upper grades, you had a greater number of scholars, you know, upwards sometimes of like 90% of the scholars that would log on. For the upper grades. For the lower grades, it just really depends. And that's where we saw the decline, because the children weren't necessarily able to access, you know, a lot of the work by themselves. So you wouldn't necessarily see them. And then where we would normally do the check would be during the morning meetings, how the number of kids that would essentially log on during that time. Because like I said before, a lot of the work was, you know, already pre-posted, so they can access it whenever they needed to access it. But for the online applications like Zoom, for example, it tells you how many times a scholar would log in. So if they didn't necessarily log in on a particular day, the teachers at the end of the week would make phone calls to those families to say, I noticed that your scholar didn't log on. So we created guidelines for the number of times and the number of minutes scholars needed to be on, because it was hard to monitor like the day-to-day. So you kind of say, well, when we look, we need to see that they have logged on 3 times for Zern on these days, Monday, Wednesday, and say, you know, Thursday, because it's in their daily schedule for when they needed to be on, and then the amount of minutes that they needed to be on. So if scholars weren't meeting the number of minutes for the week, then the teachers will give a phone call, and then the scholars will be able to make that time. Like I said, the scholars that were in the upper school, they were able to access it on their own. So they really didn't need the support of a parent to be able to get on and make their minutes. And again, they were used to the platform. So you saw more, the attendance rates or percentages were higher there. But in the lower school, you can see the decline, because again, the children had to wait for you know, a parent to be able to assist, to then be able to get on, log on, and whatever additional support that they needed. So there was a huge discrepancy between the lower and the upper school, which is why now there's this talk around, you know, face-to-face instruction for the younger subset of students, because they need a little bit more you know, one-to-one support as opposed to, you know, the older children.
Right. Okay, thank you. So the educators gave the younger ones, did they actually have them in breakout rooms, or did they give them the support of the one-to-one? And what did some...
Yeah, they had office hours, but it was the same thing because so when you think about like a 5-year-old, it's hard for a 5-year-old, you know, to understand essentially how do I go on and access my teacher's, you know, office hours. Some students, you know, like my 5-year-old, for example, she recognizes I'll walk her through, this is how you log on to your morning meeting every morning. So, you know, every day at 9, your class starts. So once you get up, you know, you have your breakfast, you click on this link, and then you know that it brings you there. But if, say, she needs to have office hours, and luckily for her, like, you know, I'm an educator, so I can support her at home. But if she needed to have office hours with her classroom teacher, there's a link there. But they still need someone to be able to kind of guide them through the process, to be able to access what they need as opposed to the older ones. And also, you know, some of our students are still learning to read certain things. And so with a 5-year-old who's a beginning reader, it might be hard for them to be able to read through particular directions to gain certain things where you have, you know, the upper school scholars that would have a little bit more autonomy in being able to access the resources that are there for them.
Thank you. In relationship to the educators, what happened when you actually phoned when they phoned the parents and the child did not meet the targeted login on time? What were, you know, what did you guys do in terms of moving forward with that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times the parents will say, you know, it's usually because either I'm not at home, and so wherever the scholar is, they might not have internet access to then be able to get on as much as they can. And so, you know, the only thing we can do is really remind them of the importance of why scholars are being able to get on, and we just have to do what we can to get them as much, you know, exposure as possible. And, you know, typically there is a little trend. And so you'll see the scholars that are kind of like outliers, the ones that are habitually not on. And so in those cases, you make certain concessions and you'll say, listen, I want you to at least try to be on for, you know, 2 hours. Or you might say, I'm going to call you tomorrow during this time so we can be on it together. So there are a certain subset of scholars that teachers kind of like have under their wings to say, I'm gonna need to show a little bit more love to this particular scholar right now because I recognize from week to week their numbers are low. So I'm gonna set aside this amount of time during my office hours to be able to support this particular family. So it's a case by case basis in terms of what supports are put in place for particular scholars.
Okay, thank you. So how many hours per day were the students actually meant to log on? How many hours per day they actually logged on and stayed on?
So in terms of instruction that the teachers have provided, we try to make it about 2 hours. But again, the teachers, the videos that are there are about, say, each lesson is about 45 minutes. But then they also have to be on their other applications for about 30 minutes, your math application, 30 minutes. There's also review material, but it's spaced out during the week. So they can be on it for about we recommended 2 hours because there are families with multiple children in that particular family as well. So that's one way it helps parents to be able to manage the time. But because the lessons are pre-recorded, they can be on for as long as they need to be on, because some scholars may need to move at a slower rate. Some scholars maybe need to move at a faster rate. And so when it's recorded, you can go back as many times as you need to, or you can, you know, move forward as you need to be able to. So you really pretty much work at your pace. For my son, like math is his strong point, and so he usually gets through that like quickly. The writing, it takes him a little bit more time, but there's a due date for his writing. So the teacher would upload the lesson for writing, and then it's not necessarily due into this Google Classroom folder until, say, about Thursday. So he has some time so he can work a little bit on it today. He can go back and fix it up tomorrow so that it's ready to be uploaded, you know, by the deadline. So you really know, it's almost like being in college. You have your syllabus and you know what you have to do for the week. All the materials is already there, because teachers, we stagger when they upload it. So all the lessons for the upcoming week, the teachers have already prepared the week prior.
Okay.
So it's always there for the students to access and it stays there.
Okay.
And then at the end of the week, they're able to make phone calls based on who's turning the assignment. And then during our Friday circle, you get to shout scholars out that have made the weekly requirements for like their online reading platform or their math reading platform. So it incentivizes also the scholars to be able to get on. And those are things that we used to do when school was in session. So we kept some of that. So they get like their little certificate, their Lexia certificate for reading, or, you know, their math shout out for being on Durham for a certain amount of hours. You know, they'll have Scholar of the Week because they have done, you know, X, Y, and Z. So different ways to keep the kids incentivized as they're working through it, because we all know, because even, you know, as an adult, when, you know, you're having to be on a Zoom meeting, and if you're on there for hours, it's like you start to lose, you know, energy and enthusiasm. And so it's the same for the kids. So as much as possible, you know, we have to make it digestible for them, because, you know, too much screen time too can be, you know, it can be hard. So it's striking a balance.
Yeah. Thank you. I could see that because, you know, lots of times one of the challenges they would actually switch off the camera, so you don't know whether or not they were there or not. You know, so this is one of the issues. Did you guys use? Did you say you use Zoom? Was it Google Classroom you guys use?
Google Classroom. So Google Classroom in combination with a single sign-on platform called Clever. And so with Clever, and it was a good place to be able to put all the applications, which again made it more manageable for the scholars, so they're not having to sign on in different places to be able to access all the different applications that they needed to. And that was helpful for the younger ones also. And they used it in class. So for the younger ones, they didn't have to type in a password. They had like a little badge. So they just scanned their badges and then it brought them onto the Clever platform. And then you'll see the application for their Google Classroom, for their Zern application, for Lexia, for their RAS Kids. So everything was sort of like in this one space once they were able to log on.
Yeah, that's brilliant though, because it means they're not floating all over the place trying to find
and then having to type in multiple passwords. It's like, Mom, I don't know how to sign on. Can you help me with my password kind of thing? You know, that was one way the kids could be autonomous in getting themselves onto where they needed to get their work started.
Yeah, and that actually gave them a sense of responsibility, because it meant that they had to take responsibility for that aspect because they knew what to do.
Yes.
You know, so it also gave them ownership as well. Okay. Another thing is in terms of how many students did the educators have per class?
Per classroom? Yeah. So our original roster of scholars was about 25 to 30 students.
Okay.
But during the virtual launch, they weren't necessarily always all on at the same time.
Okay.
But teachers were responsible for making sure that they were able to connect with students throughout all of the scholars on their roster throughout the week. But they're not necessarily all on the platform at the same time.
Okay. So therefore the educator had to be really flexible to know, well, whatever time this child ready to come on, you know, the educator had to be logged on at all times.
Well, not logged on at all times. They had office hours.
Okay.
So there were office hours that were created so the scholars will know what windows of time their teachers would be available.
Okay.
But outside of those office hours, if say a parent, you know, made a request, like they would either call the teacher or email the teacher or email me to say, you know, I need some additional support with my scholar. We'll say, well, what time works for you? And then we can get on at this time to then be able to support you in whatever, you know, the request was. But there were set office hours, so everybody knew what the office hours were for teachers and then on what days, because we also had team meetings that needed to happen. You know, we had planning meetings that still kept happening. So we had to make sure that those hours did not conflict. So we had to have set times. But outside of that, you can schedule time based on the needs of our families.
Okay. So, flexibility was quite essential in the sense that the educator had to be flexible should in case a parent needed to see them outside of his hours.
Yeah, okay. And you know what? It's not even atypical because, I mean, that's who we are as educators, where we always have to some way make time. I remember when we were physically in the building, we had teachers that would stay after school, to have a meeting with a parent who wasn't able to come in during, a scheduled prep time that she can have that, or he can have that conversation, because again, we recognize that, in particular places, we are working with working families. And so, we have to be flexible in those times. There are many times, I would have to have meetings either before school started or, after school ended, to be able to see some of our families. And that's the reality, of what we do,
Yeah. It is so I'm really glad that you actually put that point across, because a lot of people seem to think that as educators that we are so lucky we have all these hours in terms of time off, etc. But there it is, that sometimes your class starts at 8:30 or 8:45, and you're in the building 10 to 8 or 8 o'clock because you need to see a parent before your lesson starts, and you're not too sure how long this meeting would last.
I would say, Debbie, I mean, you probably see this little clap that I just did a while ago, this little class, because, when those remarks are passed, and now you kind of, get to a place where you try to, as teachers, as we always do, to educate people, to have them realize, like, this profession, like no other, requires so much time and sacrifice. And if you're a teacher that's in this work for this work, you sometimes you don't even know how to reconcile that time for your own family and children, because the scholars that you're with mean so much to you. And I think, again, in this day and age, I think families are starting to recognize the challenges that teachers face every day, because you're not just a teacher to the scholars that come in. And again, there are levels to this. Depending on where you're teaching, you become that scholar's nurse, that scholar's, therapist, that's got everything that a child may need in a minute or a moment before you actually start teaching. There are levels to doing this. And so, whenever someone, passes the comment about the work is easy, you get this time off, come try being a teacher. Let's talk about it, because your day starts at the crack of dawn, and it doesn't end there, because when you leave, you got to do all this planning. And then you got to figure out what your lesson looks like. And if you're having to analyze data to make sure you're meeting the needs of your kids, you're doing that real time. So you're going back and you're switching the lesson you planned last week to make it happen real time, to ensure you're moving kids. And at the end of the day, you have about 30 scholars. I mean, there was a point where I had 35 children in the classroom, where my teachers were like, well, wait a minute now, that's the state of education. And then within the 35 students you have in a classroom, you got kids with individual needs. And so teachers are now then having to figure out, how do I reach this subset of scholars? So within my plan, there's a sub-plan, and then there's another plan to be able to meet the needs of these scholars. And then when you start thinking about funding and resources, that's also a scarce commodity. So you're doing the job of having other personnel on board to be able to support those needs. So, I can go on about this for days, but I would caution that person who would make a comment like that, this work ain't easy. And again, I'll say it ain't for the faint of heart.
That's very true. Very true, because as you rightly said, before we actually start teaching, we have to sort out the well-being of that child, because that child might have not had any breakfast, which means they're switching off. You need to see what you have in your drawer to feed them. When they come after lunchtime, one student had said to me just before we broke up, I said, what's the matter? Oh, I haven't had lunch. So therefore you had to say, okay, here you are, go and get yourself some lunch. So it's like all of that. You know, you have to be everything to that child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so as you say, teaching is not for the faint-hearted. I like that statement. Okay, thank you very much. What tips would you give to anybody? The fact that you are coming from the place of the supporter of the educator and the students, what would be the tips you would give?
I think always, I always start with, keeping at the top of mind what is in the best interest of your scholars. You always have to keep that at the top of mind and let that drive everything else that you do. And so, if there's an emotional need that needs to be met before you start that math lesson, then let's deal with that. And there's going to be a lot of that, going back, this school year, where we're going to have to be addressing a lot of the trauma, and schools are really going to have to prepare for that, because a lot of the connections that students build, and school is a safe haven for a lot of the students that we serve. Yep. And so when they come back, it's going to be a lot of sort of like, getting kids reacclimated to what it means to be back in the space of learning, whatever other traumas they experience outside of that, whether it's the loss of loved ones through COVID, because we've lost so many people, somebody is bound to be stepping in your classroom that have experienced something. And so, we want to be, as I would say, as present and as responsive for in how we're supporting our scholars. Think about what the needs are of our scholars coming back. So if above anything else that I've said here today, keep at the top of mind what is in the best interest of your scholars, and then let that drive your actions moving forward.
And in relationship to the educators, have you got any?
I would say the same thing for educators as well in general. And I think that that's the thing that educators tend to do, which is that I'm thinking about my scholar. I want what's in the best interest of my scholar. And so a lot of times, when we'll have conversations, with our teachers, they'll come and they'll say, listen, I have this scholar in my class that's struggling with this. How can I support this particular scholar? Or I'm deciding to go this direction because I'm noticing this is what the data in my class is telling me. So I would say the same thing across the board. And even for parents as well. Start from what is in the best interest of our scholars, because I think a lot of times people forget that children are little people. And so it's always, this like, no, you're the child. I'm going to say what's good for you. This is the schedule you got. You're going to follow this schedule. This is how it's going to be, not necessarily taking into account what the child's experience of what is happening here. Just as much as your experience, you're having an experience, they're having an experience. And so we have to take that into account. We know that, yes, academics is important and you want them to be able to thrive. But if I'm not good emotionally, and that goes for adults too, if you're not good emotionally, it's going to be very hard for you to focus on anything else. And so we have to be able to pay attention to what the needs of the scholars are before, anything else. So that's what I'll tell, educators. That's what I'll tell parents, keep at the top of mind what is in the best interest of your scholar. Recognize what your needs are, and then let that be your North Star in how you navigate what happens here on out.
Well, I totally agree with you there, because you're so right, because they always are forgetting that these children are little people, replica of the adults. And you always hear, well, this is what I want you to do, not taking in consideration that this child also have an idea of how they feel it would work best for them. Yes. And that's something we need to, we really need to start taking into consideration as well. Thank you very much for those tips. And I really connect with you on that, because Too often we forget these children have a mind of their own. We need to tap into that instead of we pushing our own ideas onto them. Too often we are not listening. We need to start listening in order to facilitate what they need and then giving them some of what they need instead of we think that they need all of what we're giving them. All doesn't always work. Sometimes they just need part of what we've got in order to make the whole. So that's
yes,
mindful of. As parents, as educators, we need to be mindful of that. Thank you very much, Michelle, for your contribution. It was fantastic. It actually, make a lot of people, make us all realize or remember that the role of educators. And I kept saying on all my programs, when we go back to the physical classroom, we need to start unpacking this and emotional aspect of the children. Michelle, there's echo on your side. I think you've got something else on.
Do you still hear it?
Yeah, I'm still hearing it. Yeah, that's better. Right. Sorry about that, folks. Technology. As I said, when we get back into the classroom, the first thing we'll have to do is unpack the psychological and emotional aspect of the child before we actually go on with the intellectual. Because as Michelle actually confirmed, and I kept saying in all my session, these children have been in isolation. Some of them have enjoyed it. Even though they have enjoyed it, we now need to actually program them back to how the role of the classroom is in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the timetable, etc. Because they need to start thinking in terms of the timetable when they get back. As much as they liked being at home, they still did not have a very firm structure. So when they go back into the physical classroom, those are some of the challenges we'll have to, and we will be encountering as educators, the lack of, routine. It doesn't matter if as parents we gave our children routine while they were on, during this time. It still is not a routine that connects to the classroom, because I know I've been giving my child a routine, but the times we have a lot more flexibility because the needs did not warrant the routine we actually had in place. So that's something we'll have to deal with when we get back to the school. And it's going to take a long time. We may not even get it right. We might still have children at the end of the academic year still haven't gone through the process. So these are some of the things as educators we'll really have to encounter, because we'll be wearing the therapist and the counseling hat for a long time when we go back.
Yeah, and I'd like to just end this to say, because it's a thing that we don't typically do as educators, because we're usually the hardest on ourselves. We got the hardest jobs, but we come to it with so much passion and drive, and we know that everything that we do has a real-time effect on the children that we teach, and the families that we interact with, but we also have to give ourselves grace. Because it's also going to be an adjustment for us going back in, as well as it will be for the scholars as well. And so if it doesn't look exactly the way that you envisioned it when you walk back into your classroom, if we end up going back for this year at all, give yourself some grace to get back to some semblance of what normalcy looks like, and know that it's not indicative of what you do as an educator. Because again, you're having to do this with limited resources, and as our federal government is showing us, with limited support in essence. And so all we have right now is each other, because we recognize what it means to be able to do this work and be able to do it well.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Thank you for that. We need to not be so hard on ourselves, and we need to remember self-care, 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 and self-love. You need to love yourself as if you're in love with your four states. We need to remember that. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning on. Thank you very much to my guest, Michelle. And I'll be back again tomorrow with another educator. Can you please like, comment and share, please. I'm sure you've got value from this. I'm not even asking if you got value. I know you've got value from this. So I'm asking you to share the value that you've got from this, because as educators, we are always giving value. That's what we do. We always give value. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a fantastic evening and stay blessed.
Thank you, Debbie.